She handed me divorce papers at my father's funeral. Not quietly, not later. Right there, between the hymn and the last prayer, she slid the envelope into my shaking hands and leaned close enough to whisper, "You don't get to control me anymore." People were crying. My aunt was holding my arm because my knees were about to fold. My father's casket was still open. And my wife, was smiling like she'd just returned a library book on time. And she did something worse. She turned to my cousins, my coworkers, even the woman from church who used to bring my dad soup, and said, loud enough to land, "I'm finally leaving her. The abuse is over." That word hung in the air like smoke. I didn't scream. I didn't defend myself. I just stood there, holding paper that said my marriage was over, while people looked at me like they were recalculating everything they thought they knew. Before I go on, pause with me for a second. If you've ever been blindsided by someone you trusted, or publicly misunderstood in a moment you couldn't fight back, tell me in the comments where you're watching from today. And if anything in this story already feels uncomfortably familiar, I want to know that too. I met her eyes waiting for something. Guilt, doubt, a crack. Nothing. She looked relieved, like she'd been holding her breath for months and finally exhaled. Someone pulled her aside. Someone else pulled me in the opposite direction. The room split without anyone meaning to. It was subtle, but it was real. You can feel when people start choosing sides, even before they know the facts. I wanted to chase her. Not to beg, just to ask why here, why today of all days. Grief is heavy. It pins you down. I was carrying my father and my marriage at the same time, and my arms were already numb. Later, in the bathroom, I stared at myself in the mirror. My eyes were swollen. My mouth looked unfamiliar, like it belonged to someone who had just been accused of something that doesn't wash off. I remember thinking, if I speak right now, it'll come out wrong. No, I didn't. The story spread faster than I expected. By evening, my phone was quiet in a way that felt loud. People who did text didn't ask questions. They asked if I was okay, in that careful way that means they've already decided something. I replayed our marriage in my head, looking for the scene she was pointing to. The moment that would make her words true. We argued, sure. We were two women with sharp minds and sharper tongues sometimes. We both hated losing. We both hated being wrong. But abuse. I paid the bills when she went back to school. I learned her moods like weather patterns. I walked on eggshells so long, I forgot what solid ground felt like. And still there it was, her version, spoken out loud, at my father's funeral. I laughed once, just a short, breathless sound. It came out wrong. Even alone, it felt like proof against me. Papers said she'd been planning this for months. That part stung more than the accusation. While I was taking my dad to chemo, while I was sleeping in a chair beside his bed, while she was telling me, "You're so strong, I don't know how you do it." Turns out, she knew exactly how I did it. Trusting her, I started noticing things I'd brushed off before. Her new friends I'd never met. The way she'd record arguments just in case. How she'd push me until I snapped, then go very quiet, very calm. I used to think that calm meant maturity. Now it looked more like strategy. At night, after the funeral crowd went home and the house went still, I sat on the edge of the bed we used to share and finally let myself feel angry. Not explosive anger, the quiet kind that rearranges your insides. I thought about how easy it is to tell a story when the other person is grieving, when they're exhausted, when their credibility is wrapped in black clothes and red eyes. I realized something then, and it scared me a little. She didn't want to leave. She wanted to win. And whatever she was setting up, it wasn't finished yet. The first lawyer I met leaned back in his chair, scanned the papers, then looked at me like I'd just walked in carrying a live wire. "She's building a record," he said. "Not reacting might have saved you." That was the first time anyone said something that didn't make me feel insane. Apparently, those recordings, carefully edited, the timing of the filing, strategic, the public accusation, insurance. Once a label sticks, people stop asking questions. They don't need proof. They need relief from uncertainty, from nuance. I walked out of his office lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because I wasn't imagining it. Heavier because this wasn't just a breakup. It was a campaign. She started posting things online, vague at first, quotes about surviving control, finding her voice. People clapped in the comments like they were watching a comeback montage. One night, I scrolled too far and saw someone I'd known for 10 years write, "So proud of you for leaving." I stared at that sentence for a long time. It's wild how confident people get when they only hear one side. Confidence is cheap when it's borrowed. I wanted to correct them, tag myself, drop screenshots, explain context like footnotes. Instead, I closed the app. Silence felt weak at first. Then it started to feel expensive, like something not everyone can afford. Immediation, she cried on cue. Perfect tears, pauses in the right places. She talked about fear, about walking on eggshells, about how my grief made me unpredictable. I watched the mediator nod. I noticed how she never mentioned specifics. No dates, no incidents, just feelings, big, floating ones no one could pin down. When it was my turn, I spoke slowly. I stuck to facts. I didn't defend my character. I described timelines, money, messages, boring things. She looked almost bored listening. Later in the hallway, she leaned toward me and said, "You're really going to do this? Make me look like the bad guy?" I almost laughed. The irony had layers. The consequences didn't hit her right away. They never do. But cracks started showing. Mutual friends stopped inviting her to things, not because they took my side, but because the drama followed her like perfume. Strong, lingering. Her stories got bigger, more intense, and weirdly less consistent. People don't always catch lies immediately, but they feel them. Confusion has a smell. Meanwhile, my life got smaller and clearer. I grieved my father properly. I slept. I cooked meals that didn't impress anyone. I stopped explaining myself. Power, I learned, doesn't announce itself. It shows up when you no longer need to be believed by everyone. The divorce finalized quietly. No victory speech, no apology. She got what she asked for, and so did I. Months later, I ran into someone who'd been at the funeral. They hesitated, then said, "I didn't know what to think back then, but I see it now." I nodded. That was enough. Some people need time. Some truths need space. I didn't lose my reputation that day. I lost people who were never going to ask twice. And honestly, that was lighter than carrying them forever. The real shift didn't happen in a courtroom or a conversation. It happened one morning when I realized I hadn't thought about her in 3 days. No replaying arguments, no imaginary speeches, no wondering what she was saying about me now. Just quiet. That's when it hit me. She wasn't taking up space in my life anymore, but she was still renting space in my head. And I was done renewing that lease. I started noticing how calm feels boring when you're used to chaos, how peace doesn't clap for you. It just sits there, waiting to be chosen. A year later, I heard she'd told the same story again. Different audience, slightly upgraded villain. Only this time, people asked questions. Not aggressively, just gently, the kind that don't attack but don't disappear either. She didn't like that. Patterns don't expose themselves loudly. They repeat until someone finally says, "Hold on." I felt no rush of satisfaction hearing that. No smile. No "I told you so" moment. Just a quiet confirmation that truth has its own calendar. You can't rush it, but you also can't cancel it. What surprised me most wasn't losing her. It was losing the version of myself that thought being patient meant being silent forever. That loyalty meant absorbing damage. That love required endurance tests. I'm still kind. I'm still patient. But I don't confuse understanding with permission anymore. That line used to blur for me. Now it's sharp, clean, non-negotiable. Funny how self-respect doesn't make noise when it arrives. It just rearranges the furniture inside you and asks you to keep it this way. If I could go back to that funeral, to the version of me holding those papers, I wouldn't tell her to fight harder. I'd tell her to stand still. To let people reveal themselves in the space you don't fill with panic. To trust that you don't need to perform innocence when you are innocent. Not everyone who walks away is a loss. Some exits are evacuations. And some accusations are confessions wearing a mask. Before I go, if anything in this story stayed with you, if a moment made you uncomfortable in that that's real way, tell me in the comments. I read them. I really do. And sometimes your words help someone else more than you know. Thank you for staying until the end, for giving me your time and your attention. This is King's Revenge Vault. I appreciate you being here.